Hello, everybody. This is Lonnie with Borderline. Welcome back to Curb University. We're going to go ahead and talk about antique release today, and what it actually is, and what it does for you. In curbing, when we're talking about coloring, we already talked about integral colors in another video. But your secondary colors, no matter if it's flat work, and the concrete guys do the flat work and they get their secondary colors, or curbing guys. Antique releases are going to be what doesn't allow your stamps to stick to the concrete. Okay, so it's a bond breaker. So for us in curbing, we're using a lot of rollers. We're now using a lot of mats and a lot of different things like that. And when you're using those mats and rollers on actual wet curb, it will stick to each other. So you got to have something that's going to break that bond. And the great thing about antique release, especially the powders, and that's the main thing we'll be talking about. Your antique powders don't allow that stamp to stick. Plus, it gives you a secondary color. So those two colors, or those two-tone colors in your curb, really set things off and really brings out that stamp. So there's a couple different release powders that I use in my company. Actually, I have several, but over the years, Butterfield, I got plenty of Butterfield colors. These come in 5-gallon buckets typically. Excuse me. Um, it really depends on the amount of pounds that are in each bucket. Each company is kind of different. Some have a bag on the inside that have the color in. You have to open up the bag and spill it into your bucket. There's also you can buy 2-gallon buckets that are smaller that fit in your trailer easier. We actually take all these 5-gallon buckets, put them in 2-gallon buckets so they fit inside our trailer much easier and they don't take up as much room. I also use some brick form colors. These are pretty popular colors or companies out there that make releases in integral colors and things like that. So we have a few of those. Also, carry some Cohill colors and whatever. All these suppliers that make antique release, really the powders are the same, and in my experience anyway, I don't really see any difference between them, with the exception of the different shades and the different colors that you can get. You might find one or two colors from one company that are really cool, and so you can go ahead and buy those and use colors from other companies and combine those together. They look really cool. You can offer a lot of antique release colors, on your website and in your company, because they're really cheap and they go a long way. So antiques are great when it comes to curbing. Really, the prices vary between, I'd say, 60 and $80 a 5-gallon bucket. It all depends on how many pounds you're getting in that bucket. So there's a little bit of variables in there. You might find a company you get a 5-gallon bucket for $65, but there's only 15 pounds of material in there. Another company might be a little bit more, but they got more poundage. So that's something you're going to have to look at. But again, that bucket of release could really last you thousands of feet when it comes to stamping your curb. How can release be applied? When it comes to curbing, okay, we're typically talking about powders here now. We'll talk about liquids in a second, but the easiest way that I've found, and we've done several different methods here over the years, and I was taught different ways, and now the basic way to add good even color onto your curb is using a paint roller, just like the picture shown. This is a 7-inch roller. It's a 1/2-inch nap, so it's really fluffy, and so it'll pick up a lot of color. You can just roll this into your bucket and you go ahead and roll it on the curb, and you'll get an even amount of powder on your curb. Years ago, they used to teach us to just grab handfuls of that out of the bucket and throw it on your curb. Well, there's a lot of waste, and it's really messy, and you don't get an even amount in sometimes, depending on the weather and how windy it is and so on. So just using a roller is really simple, and in my opinion, it's really the easiest way to get release on your curb. Now, I mentioned liquid release just a second ago. When it comes to curb, liquid release is one of those things where we don't use it very often because we're typically working at angles. Slant style curb is what most people stamp on. It's got a nice flat surface, and you're working with an angle. Liquid release is clear, so when you spray this on, what you got to do is just basically spray your whole curb with this using a poly sprayer, and then you have to spray your stamp. Could be a roller, could be a mat, and you're going to get them wet, and you're going to go ahead and roll that impression in. And because you have that wet, it's not going to allow that stamp to stick to the concrete. Uh, if that's not on there, that the concrete will come right off on your stamp. It'll stick, and it'll leave all sorts of marks and things like that. No matter if you're using a mat or if you're using a roller. The powders, you can see that they're all on there, and the powders are always going to be on there, so you have a little bit more time to work. Liquid releases they are basically solvents. This particular one is a bubble gum release. You can buy this; it's expensive. It's a solvent, but it smells like bubble gum, so it smells nice. You can take mineral spirits or paint thinner, and you can spray that on your curb, and you can spray your stamp or your mats, and you can go ahead and use that as a release, and it won't allow your stamp to stick. But that evaporates fairly quickly, so you have to work quickly in the sunlight. In my opinion, liquid releases aren't nearly as good as powders because you're not getting a secondary color. And if a homeowner wanted a curb that was stamped without a secondary color, they're getting charged exactly the same as if I was putting a secondary color in there and using a powder release, because I'm still going through the labor of stamping that. And in my opinion, it doesn't really make any sense not to do that without getting a secondary color. That's what's really going to bring that stamp out and make those stamps, really show the contrasts and things like that. If you're just using one solid color and you just use liquid release like this, in my opinion, it just doesn't look as good. So we typically stay away from liquids and just use strictly powders. So hopefully that helps you a little bit with releases. Antique releases are a great way to add a secondary color, and it's fantastic to show those customers those colors and really get some different combinations and different looks depending on what they have for their rock or their mulch. Some of the stone that's on the front of their house, you can really get a nice two-tone color, sometimes even more colors than that, depending on what you're doing, to add different release powders in there to really make it look nice, and really kind of set you off between yourself and some other companies in your area. So hopefully that helps you a little bit with the releases, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you.